The blistering heat of plasma bolts seared human flesh as Craig Mason dove for cover in the rubble-strewn alien streets. Vorta insects sprayed green blood as the hardened human marines cut them down with ruthless efficiency. "We're not going to fucking die on this shithole, and we're not going to let these bug bastards enslave the Naxians," Craig shouted. "Kill 'em all!" Craig's mind raced back to the desperate distress call from Xanth, the Naxian ambassador, begging the humans for aid against the invading Vorta. Craig had seen pics of the Naxians, strange purple tentacled aliens, but peaceful, almost childlike in their innocence. The humans couldn't turn their back. The human forces had mobilized in days, thousands of volunteer soldiers jetting across the galaxy to defend the helpless Naxians on their jungle planet of Thule. Now Craig was here, plasma rifle bucking against his shoulder, scything down the clicking, hissing Vorta warriors that scuttled from the ruins on segmented legs. Bombs burst, human screams and alien screeches filled the air, and bullets and energy blasts crisscrossed the cratered streets. The jungle world of Thule would be the battleground where humans made their stand. Craig knew if the Vorta took the Naxian capital, they would breed, spread, enslave the planet and its gentle inhabitants, stealing the rich mineral resources. The galaxy would see humans as cowards, too weak to defend the innocent. A Vorta warrior burst from a shattered doorway, slashing with razor forelimbs. Craig snap-fired from the hip, stitching the creature with sizzling plasma. It thrashed and died, oozing green. "Fuck you," Craig snarled. The private next to him caught a plasma bolt and fell screaming. Craig hardly spared a glance. The Vorta were swarming, more and more skittering from the ruins. Plasma and tracers lit the early evening gloom. The fate of the Naxians, the fate of humanity's pride, hung on this battle. Craig glanced at the soldiers around him, seeing the same cold resolve in their eyes, their jaws set in determination. They had to win. Not one step back, kill or be killed. The Vorta surged forward in a clicking, shrieking tide, and the humans opened fire. Bullets flew, plasma sizzled, aliens died. Craig screamed his defiance. "Come on, you fucking bugs! Come and get what's coming to you!" Craig's comm crackled to life as he blasted another Vorta warrior. It was Xanth, his voice shaking with fear. "Craig, the Vorta have taken the capital. They're holding our leaders hostage and say they'll kill them if you don't retreat now." "Fuck," Craig snarled. He couldn't abandon the Naxians to slavery and death. But his platoon was getting hammered, running low on ammo and men. He keyed his comm. "Reese, hack into the Vorta battlenet. Send them orders to fall back, make it look like it's coming from their HQ." "On it, sir." Reese's fingers flew over her console. Craig prayed this desperate gamble would work. The Vorta had the numbers, but they were predictable depending on orders from Central Command. If Reese could spoof their comms... A few tense minutes passed. Plasma bolts sizzled overhead. Then, incredibly, the Vorta started to disengage, scuttling back into the ruins. "It worked, they're falling back," Reese crowed. "Marines on me, we're going in, hostage rescue up," Craig barked. "Let's move." They advanced cautiously through the rubble-strewn streets, leapfrogging from cover to cover. Sporadic plasma fire snapped by as they flushed out the remaining Vorta rear guard. Private Fenton caught a bolt in the throat, his screams gurgling away as he drowned in his own blood. As they neared the government center, resistance intensified. The Vorta knew they'd been duped and were determined to make the humans pay for every inch. The creatures scuttled through the ruins, popping up to spray volleys of plasma. Marines fell screaming. Craig's ears rang with the clamor of battle and the cries of the wounded. The government compound loomed ahead, a battered concrete structure pitted by plasma impacts. Craig could see Vorta guards swarming over it like angry ants. The Marines scrambled up, stacking along the wall. Craig slung his rifle and drew his plasma pistol and combat knife. Henson slapped a frame charge on the door. A thunderous boom and the metal panel buckled inward. Craig was first through the gap, pistol leveled. A Vorta guard reared up in front of him, bladed forelimbs slashing. Craig snap-fired, the plasma bolt taking the creature in the thorax. It exploded in a shower of green ichor. More Marines poured in, fanning out. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the confined space as the humans and Vorta battled at point-blank range. Craig stabbed one through its bulbous eyes while he put a pistol bolt through another's head. "Craig!" It was Xanth, his voice shrill with terror. The Naxian leader was cowering in the corner with his fellow dignitaries. Let's go, move it," Craig barked. The Marines formed up around the rescued hostages. They fell back, fighting for every step. 2 more Marines went down from Vorta plasma, but then they were out, into the open. "Covering fire," Craig ordered. The Marines laid down a blistering barrage, forcing the Vorta to duck. They hustled the hostages away from the compound. Dropships swooped down, disgorging more Marines to establish a perimeter. Craig shoved Xanth aboard a dropship. Craig's face was grim as he surveyed the burning city. The Marines still battling the Vorta in the ruins. So many had fallen to save this world. "Don't thank us yet," he growled. "This fight is just getting started. And I swear I'm going to make every one of those fucking bugs pay for what they've done." The dropship ferried Craig and his team away from the smoking ruins of the capital, the adrenaline of battle still surging through their veins. On board, Xanth slumped against the bulkhead, his tentacles trembling. Craig knelt beside the Naxian leader, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Oh, you're safe now," Craig said. "We'll regroup and figure out our next move." The dropship landed at a hidden rebel base deep in Thul's wilderness, far from the Vorta-occupied cities. Craig helped Xanth out of the ship, the Naxian's tentacles still quivering with shock and exhaustion. Inside the base, Craig gathered his remaining Marines and the Naxian rebel leaders. Xanth's voice was grave. "The Vorta invasion is only the beginning. They serve the Xyrax Dominion, a powerful alliance of species that seeks to conquer and exploit the weak. With Thul fallen, they will turn their eyes to other worlds. Your Earth may be next." Craig's gut clenched. Earth was still new to the galactic stage, its defenses untested against a foe like the Xyrax. He had to warn them. He turned to his comms officer. "Get me a line to Earth Command now." A few tense minutes passed before the connection was established. Craig relayed the dire news, the words spilling out in an urgent rush. He requested immediate reinforcements, a full expeditionary force to drive the Vorta from Thul and defend against the Xyrax threat. The response from Earth Command was not what he had hoped. "Stand down, Captain," the general said, his voice crackly over the comm. "We cannot risk a full-scale war with this Xyrax Dominion. You are to cease all offensive operations and return to Earth immediately." Craig's jaw clenched. "Sir, with respect, if we don't stop the Vorta here, there won't be an Earth left to defend. The Xyrax will roll right over us." Craig took a deep breath. He knew what he had to do, even if it meant sacrificing his own career and freedom. He turned to Xanth. "Can your people fight?" The Naxian leader nodded, a new steel in his voice. "We will fight alongside you, Captain. This is our world. We won't let the Vorta enslave us." Craig clasped Xanth's tentacle. "Then let's get to work. We'll start with a raid on that Vorta munitions depot we spotted on the way in." As the Marines and Naxians began to plan their attack, Craig knew he was crossing a line. Disobeying direct orders, allying with rebels, it was grounds for court-martial at best, execution at worst. But the stakes were too high. The Vorta had to be stopped here, or Earth would fall next. He would fight to his last breath to ensure that didn't happen. "Gear up," he told his Marines. "We hit the depot at dawn, and make sure you're loaded for bug. We're going to be squashing a lot of them." Plasma rifles charged and knives were sharpened as the humans and Naxians prepared for battle. Craig looked out over the alien landscape, the distant glow of burning cities on the horizon. The fight for Thul, for the fate of the galaxy, had only just begun. Dawn broke over the Vorta munitions depot, the sun's rays glinting off the compound's reinforced walls. Craig and his team crouched in the dense jungle undergrowth, plasma rifles at the ready. Beside them, a squad of Naxian rebels shifted nervously, their tentacles gripping an assortment of scavenged weapons. "All right, listen up," Craig whispered, his voice hard. "We hit them fast and hard. Reese, you take your team and secure the armory. Bulldog, you're with me on the main assault. We're not leaving until this place is a smoking crater. Bulldog grinned, hefting his plasma rifle. Hurrah, Captain. Let's send these bugs straight to hell. They moved out, darting from cover to cover as they approached the compound. The Vorta sentries chittered in alarm, but too late. Craig and his Marines opened fire, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Vorta warriors erupted in showers of green ichor as they fell. Craig and Bulldog led the charge, blasting through the main gates. Vorta warriors swarmed to meet them, plasma rifles spitting deadly fire. Craig dove into cover, popping up to snap off shots. Beside him, Bulldog laughed as he mowed down the charging insects. "Is that all you've got?" he roared. "Come on, you fucking bugs!" They fought their way into the compound, plasma flying thick and fast. A bolt sizzled past Craig's ear, close enough to scorch his skin. He hardly noticed, lost in the adrenaline rush of battle. Then a scream. Craig's head snapped around. A group of Naxian civilians, tentacles waving in terror, had blundered into the crossfire. The Vorta warriors turned their weapons on the helpless aliens, plasma bolts searing towards them. "No!" Bulldog roared. He leapt from cover, charging towards the civilians. His plasma rifle bucked in his hands, scything down the Vorta, threatening them. But there were too many. A plasma bolt caught Bulldog in the chest, burning through his armor. Another struck his leg, sending him sprawling. "Bulldog!" Craig screamed. He surged forward, plasma rifle blazing. The remaining Vorta fell before his onslaught. Craig skidded to his knees beside his fallen friend, cradling him in his arms. "Finish the fight, Craig," he rasped. "Don't let these bastards win. Protect the innocent." His eyes glazed over, his final breath rattling from his lungs. Grief and rage surged through Craig, a searing heat more intense than any plasma bolt. He threw back his head and howled his fury to the uncaring sky. His Marines gathered around him, their faces grim. The Naxian civilians huddled nearby, staring at the fallen human who had given his life to save them. Craig rose to his feet, Bulldog's blood staining his hands. His eyes were hard as flint, his voice a low growl. "We're not stopping," he snarled. "We're going to hit the Vorta again and again until they're driven from this world. We're going to make them pay for every life they've taken, for Bulldog and for every Naxian they've slaughtered." His Marines nodded, their faces set with the same grim determination. The Naxians raised their weapons, tentacles clenching with newfound resolve. In the weeks that followed, Craig and his allies launched a series of daring raids against the Vorta, striking supply convoys, communications hubs, and troop encampments. Each victory, hard-won and blood-soaked, chipped away at the invaders' hold on Thule. The Naxian resistance swelled with each passing day, bolstered by Craig's unwavering resolve and the tales of the fearless humans fighting beside them. But their successes did not go unnoticed. On the bridge of his mighty warship, Emperor Zorgax, ruler of the Xirax Dominion, slammed his fist on the arm of his command throne. "These humans dare defy us," he snarled, his voice a guttural rasp. "They think they can stand against the might of the Xirax Dominion?" He turned to the towering figure kneeling before him, a nightmarish fusion of flesh and machine. The Reaper, Zorgax's most feared enforcer, raised his head, his eyes glowing with malevolent red light. "Go to Thule," Zorgax commanded. "Take your death squad and crush this resistance. Make an example of these humans. Show them the price of defiance." The Reaper rose to his feet, a low growl rumbling from his throat. "As you command, my Emperor. The humans will learn to fear the name of the Xirax Dominion." As the Reaper's ship tore through the void towards Thule, Craig and his allies celebrated their latest victory, unaware of the looming threat. But deep in his heart, Craig felt a cold sense of foreboding, a premonition of the battles to come. He knew that their fight was far from over, that the true test of their resolve was yet to come. He looked up at the stars, his grip tightening on his plasma rifle. Whatever came, he would face it head-on. For Bulldog, for the Naxians, for all the innocent lives hanging in the balance. The Reaper was coming, and Craig would be ready to meet him. The Reaper's arrival on Thule marked a terrifying escalation in the war. His death squad, a cadre of gene-boosted Vorta elites, cut a swath of destruction through the rebel bases. Advanced plasma cannons and seeker drones rained death from above, while the Reaper himself led the ground assault, a whirlwind of blades and death that scythed through Naxian and human defenders alike. Craig and his Marines fought with desperate valor, but the rebel forces were outmatched. Base after base fell to the onslaught, the survivors forced to scatter and flee into Thul's wilderness. Craig grimaced as reports flooded in of mounting casualties, of rebel strongholds reduced to smoking ruins. The situation was dire, and he knew it. In the claustrophobic confines of a camouflaged bunker, Craig gathered his remaining officers. Their faces were haggard, etched with the strain of endless battles and dwindling hope. "We can't beat the Reaper head-on," Craig said, his voice roughened by fatigue and smoke. "We need intel, a weakness we can exploit." "The Vorta comms hub," Sergeant Hawkins suggested. "If we can tap into their networks, we might learn something useful." Craig nodded grimly. It was a long shot, but they were out of options. "Gear up," he ordered. "We move out in 10. The strike team moved through the jungle like ghosts, Craig in the lead. They avoided Vorta patrols with held breaths and silent signals, every rustle of leaves a heart-stopping threat. As they neared the comms hub, a towering spire bristling with antennae, the team fanned out. Reese and her tech specialists moved to infiltrate the facility, while Craig and the others stood guard. Then all hell broke loose. Vorta drones descended from the sky, strafing the team with plasma fire. Soldiers screamed and fell as the jungle erupted into an inferno. Vorta troops swarmed from the undergrowth, their chittering battle cries filling the air. Craig and his Marines fought back with desperate ferocity, but they were badly outnumbered. Plasma bolts seared the air as the humans fell back, trading their lives for every inch of ground. Craig saw Reese go down, a smoking hole in her chest. He roared in anguish, blasting a Vorta soldier into shreds of torn carapace. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, a barrage of missiles streaked from the sky, engulfing the Vorta forces in a storm of fire. Sleek attack craft swooped low, disgorging warriors in unfamiliar armor who fell upon the Vorta with ruthless efficiency. As the battle turned, a towering figure strode from the jungle, 4 arms each wielding a crackling energy glaive. He cut down the remaining Vorta with contemptuous ease before approaching Craig, who trained his rifle warily on the newcomer. "Peace, human," the alien rumbled, his voice a guttural snarl. "I am Zaktar, and we share a common enemy." Zaktar revealed himself as a Vorta general, but one disillusioned with the cruelty of the Zirax Dominion. He spoke of a growing resistance within the Dominion's ranks, of those sickened by Emperor Zorgax's tyranny. "Join us," Zaktar urged. "Together we can defeat the Reaper and strike a blow against the Dominion that will shake the galaxy." As Zaktar outlined a daring gambit to lure the Reaper into a trap and eliminate him, Craig felt a flicker of hope amidst the grim certainty of the battle to come. The Reaper was a fearsome foe, and this fight would likely be the most desperate and costly of Craig's life. But he steeled himself, remembering Bulldog's sacrifice, the faces of the Naxians he'd sworn to protect. He would see this through no matter the cost. For the sake of all he held dear, the Reaper had to be stopped. In the depths of the rebel stronghold, Craig, Zaktar and their allies planned their next move. Holomaps flickered with the disposition of Dominion forces, the Reaper's last known location a menacing red glow. They schemed and argued, looking for any weakness in their enemy's defenses. "It won't be easy," Zaktar growled. "The Reaper is cunning and his death squad fiercely loyal. We'll need to hit him hard and fast, give him no chance to retaliate." Craig nodded, his jaw set with grim determination. "We'll need a diversion, something to draw him out, and then we strike with everything we've got." As the plan took shape, Craig couldn't shake the cold knot of dread in his gut. So many things could go wrong, so many lives hung in the balance. But he pushed those fears aside. They had a chance now, a slim hope where before there had been none, and he would seize it with both hands come what may. The die was cast. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it and pray that when the smoke cleared they would be the ones left standing. The ancient Naxian ruins lay still, a desolate landscape of crumbling stone and dust, but beneath the eerie calm a storm was brewing. Craig, Zaktar, and their rebel forces crouched in the shadows, weapons primed, hearts pounding with anticipation. This was the moment they had planned for, the chance to strike a decisive blow against the Reaper and his Vorta minions. Craig's grip tightened on his plasma rifle as he scanned the horizon. Beside him, Zaktar's forearms flexed, each one wielding a crackling energy glaive. The former Vorta general had proven himself a valuable ally, his tactical cunning and raw ferocity a match for any human soldier. A distant hum grew louder, the unmistakable sound of Vorta dropships. The Reaper was coming, lured by the false intel they had carefully leaked. Craig's heart raced as he watched the ships descend, disgorging the Reaper and his death squad into the ruins. "Stand ready," he whispered into his comm. "Wait for my signal." The Vorta advanced, their chitinous armor glinting in the harsh sunlight. The Reaper strode at their head, a towering figure of nightmares, his genetically enhanced body bristling with weapons. Closer, closer. Craig's finger hovered over the detonator. The Reaper stepped into the kill zone. The ruins erupted in a maelstrom of fire and shrapnel. Hidden charges detonated, ancient buildings collapsing inward, burying Vorta soldiers beneath tons of rubble. Sniper rounds cracked, finding gaps in chitinous armor, dropping the insectoid warriors in sprays of green ichor. Craig and Zaktar burst from cover, rallying their forces into the fray. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as human, Naxian and Vorta rebels clashed with the Reaper's elite in brutal close-quarters combat. At the heart of the chaos, Craig found himself face to face with the Reaper. The super soldier loomed over him, his eyes burning with malevolent red light. Craig opened fire, plasma bolts sizzling against the Reaper's armor, but the genetically engineered monstrosity shrugged off the hits, closing the distance with terrifying speed. They crashed together, Craig's rifle knocked spinning from his hands. The Reaper's blade slashed, drawing sparks from Craig's armor, driving him back. Craig drew his combat knife, parrying frantically, but it was like fighting a force of nature. The Reaper was faster, stronger, shrugging off wounds that would have dropped any normal foe. A backhand blow sent Craig flying, crashing through a crumbling wall. He struggled to rise, his head ringing, blood dripping into his eyes. The Reaper stalked forward, a low growl rumbling from his throat. "Zaktar!" Craig roared, desperation fueling his cry. The Vorta general turned, saw Craig's plight. With a bellow of rage he charged, energy glaives whirling. The Reaper met his rush, blades clashing in a storm of sparks. Craig dragged himself to his feet, staggering back into the fray. Together he and Zaktar harried the Reaper, darting into land blows, then dancing back out of reach. It was like fighting a mountain, but slowly, inexorably, they drove him back. Zaktar saw the opening first. With a fierce cry he lunged, glaive scissoring in a brutal crosscut. The Reaper staggered, off balance. Craig seized the moment, tackling the super soldier, bearing him to the ground. They grappled, rolling through the dust, trading bone-crushing blows. Craig felt ribs crack, tasted blood, but he held on with grim determination. Over the Reaper's shoulder he saw Zaktar, a plasma grenade primed in his hand. Their eyes met, a moment of perfect understanding. Craig nodded, a fractional tilt of his head. Then, with a roar of effort, he heaved, rolling himself and the Reaper over, pinning the super soldier beneath him. Zaktar leapt, slamming the grenade onto the Reaper's chest. Craig hurled himself aside, a heartbeat before the world vanished in a blinding flash of plasma fire. Of Zaktar there was no sign. Craig staggered to the crater's edge, staring into the smoking ruin. The Reaper was gone, vaporized in the plasma blast, but so too was the Vorta general, sacrificing himself to end the Dominion's most feared enforcer. Around him, the battle was winding down. With the Reaper's fall, the fight had drained out of the Vorta. Those that could were fleeing, scattering into the ruins. Craig's forces were mopping up the remnants, tending to their wounded. But Craig barely noticed. He stared into the crater, numb, exhausted. They had won. The Reaper was dead, a blow struck against the Zyrax dominion that would echo across the stars. But the cost? Zaktar, Bulldog, Reese, so many others. Friends, comrades lost to this brutal war. Craig clenched his fists, ignoring the pain of cracked knuckles, the sting of smoke-stung eyes. This wasn't over, he knew. The Reaper was dead, but the Dominion remained. Emperor Zorgax still sat upon his throne, still coveted the worlds of the free. There would be more battles, more sacrifices. The road ahead was stained with blood and loss. But for now at least they had struck a blow. They had shown the galaxy that the Dominion was not invincible, that even the mightiest could fall. Craig turned from the crater, squaring his shoulders. There was work still to be done, wounded to tend, defenses to shore up. The Reaper was dead, but the war raged on. The news of the Reaper's demise surged through the Naxian resistance like an electric current. In rebel bases hidden deep in the jungle, tentacles slapped together in thunderous applause. In the bombed-out streets of the capital, Naxian fighters pumped their appendages in the air, plasma rifles held high. The humans had done it. The invincible super-soldier was no more. Craig watched as the celebration swept through the ranks, but there was no time to rest on their laurels. They had to press the advantage. He gathered his officers, both human and Naxian. The Vorta are reeling. Now's our chance to hit them hard. We're going to launch simultaneous strikes on every major Dominion stronghold and supply depot on the planet. The officers nodded, grim determination etched on their faces. They knew the risks, but they also knew this was their best shot. The offensive began at dawn. Across the planet, rebel forces surged forth from their hidden bases. Plasma fire lit up the early morning gloom as they clashed with the Vorta defenders. In the capital, Craig led the charge. His Marines, bolstered by Naxian resistance fighters, smashed through the Vorta barricades. Vorta warriors fell before the onslaught, their compound eyes wide with fear. Without the Reaper to lead them, their resolve crumbled like dirt. Block by block, street by street, the rebels advanced. Vorta positions fell one after another. Craig watched as the Dominion flag was torn down from the government center, replaced by the fluttering banner of Free Thule. But even as they savored the sweet taste of victory, a new horror was unleashed. It started in the slums, a strange sickness that left Naxians writhing in agony, their purple skin mottled with oozing lesions. But it spread with terrifying speed, leaping from district to district, city to city. Within days, the planet was in the grip of a plague the likes of which Craig had never seen. Naxians died by the thousands, their tentacles shriveling, their eyes milky with the ravages of the disease. Emperor Zorgax's face appeared on every comm screen, his lipless mouth twisted in a cruel grin. "Lay down your arms, rebels," he gloated. "Surrender, and I will provide the cure. Resist, and watch your precious Naxians die." Craig slammed his fist against the table. He would not let that monster win, not like this. In a secret bunker beneath the capital, Craig met with a group of Naxian scientists, their head tendrils drooping with exhaustion and despair. "There must be a cure," Craig insisted. "Some way to stop this plague." The lead scientist, a Naxian named Xyloth, shook his bulbous head. "The bioweapon is unlike anything we've seen. It was engineered by the Dominion's top geneticists, but—" He paused, a glimmer of hope in his compound eyes. "There are rumors of an antidote developed in a secret Dominion lab deep in the Maw." The Maw. Craig shuddered. A vast stretch of hostile jungle teeming with vicious predators and treacherous terrain. But what choice did they have? He gathered his best fighters, both human and Naxian. They loaded up on supplies, checked their weapons. Craig met each of their gazes, seeing the same determination that burned in his own heart. "We're going to find that antidote," he vowed. "We're going to save Thule, and we're going to make the Dominion pay for every life they've taken." They set out at first light, Xyloth guiding them through the dense undergrowth. The Maw lived up to its name, a gaping maw of danger and death. Venomous insects the size of a man's head buzzed through the air. Snarling predators stalked them from the shadows. But they pressed on, driven by desperation, and the knowledge that every minute meant more Naxian lives lost. After a grueling trek, they reached the facility. It rose from the jungle like a metallic tumor, all gleaming alloy and bristling defenses. Vorta soldiers swarmed over the walls, plasma rifles at the ready. Craig turned to his team. Here's the plan. We're going to hit them hard and fast. Xyloth and his scientists will find the antidote. The rest of us will buy them the time they need. They nodded, faces grim beneath the camouflage paint. Craig raised his fist. For Thule! For Thule, they echoed. And then they were moving, bursting from the underbrush, plasma rifles spitting fire. The Vorta reacted instantly, a hail of plasma bolts filling the air. Craig's team scattered, taking cover behind the massive tree trunks. They returned fire, picking off the defenders one by one. Craig lobbed a plasma grenade, blowing a hole in the perimeter wall. Move, move! They surged forward, pouring through the breach. Vorta warriors boiled out to meet them, screeching war cries. The jungle came alive with the clamor of battle, plasma fire, and dying screams. Craig fought like a man possessed, his rifle bucking in his hands, spent power cells sizzling at his feet. Beside him, his companions battled with equal ferocity, human and Naxian, united against a common foe. They blasted their way into the facility, the corridors ringing with the thunder of combat. Auto turrets swiveled to target them, energy beams sizzling through the air. Craig dove and rolled, feeling the heat of the beams on his skin. At last they reached the central lab. The doors exploded inward, Craig's boots slamming them off their hinges. Inside, a spindly Vorta in a white coat whirled to face them. His compound eyes widened in shock and fear. "You're too late," he hissed. "The antidote is mine. The Dominion will rise and Thule will fall." Craig leveled his rifle. "Hand it over, Doc, now." The geneticist's claw inched towards a console. Craig saw the self-destruct warning flashing on the screens. The Naxian scientist lunged for a vial of glowing blue liquid. The moment it was in his tentacles, a klaxon began to blare. Self-destruct sequence initiated. Evacuate immediately. They ran, racing through the shuddering corridors as the facility began to tear itself apart. Explosions chased their heels, walls buckling, ceilings caving in. They burst out into the jungle, stumbling and gasping as a fireball consumed the lab behind them. Craig doubled over, sucking in lungfuls of humid air. Xyloth held up the vial, his tentacles shaking. "We did it," he whispered. "We have the cure." Craig clasped his shoulder. "You did it, Doc. You saved your people." But even as they celebrated, Craig knew their fight was far from over. Emperor Zorgax was still out there. The Dominion still cast its shadow over the galaxy. He turned his gaze to the stars, to the battles yet to come. "Zorgax," he growled, "I'm coming for you." With the antidote in hand, Craig and his team raced back to the Naxian capital, plasma rifles clutched tight. The once vibrant streets were now choked with the sick and dying, tentacles writhing in agony. Medics and volunteers swarmed through the crowds, administering the life-saving cure. Craig and his Marines joined the effort, injecting the glowing blue liquid into every afflicted Naxian they could find. Slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. The lesions faded, the seizures stilled. Naxians who had been at death's door blinked back to life, their tentacles quivering with renewed strength. A cheer went up from the exhausted medics, echoed by the Marines. They had done it. The plague was stopped. But there was no time to celebrate. A urgent transmission crackled over the comms, the voice of Earth's High Command. "Captain Mason, we have a situation. A massive Dominion fleet has just entered the solar system. They're on a direct course for Earth. We need you back here, now." Craig's blood ran cold. The Dominion was coming for his homeworld. Everything he had fought for, everything he had sacrificed, it would all be for nothing if Earth fell. He turned to Xanth, clasping the Naxian's tentacle. "I have to go," he said. "Earth needs me, but I'm leaving my best Marines here to help you rebuild. You'll have to lead the resistance now." Xanth nodded solemnly. "We will fight on, Captain, for Thule and for Earth. May the stars guide your path." But as Craig prepared to depart, A new horror descended from the skies. Dominion warships, their hulls gleaming with cruel intent, opened fire on the planet's surface. Plasma beams rained down, incinerating cities, turning forests to ash. The ground shook with the impact, buildings crumbling into rubble. Screams filled the air as the orbital onslaught continued. Naxians and humans alike were vaporized in the blink of an eye, reduced to shadows on the scorched earth. Craig knew they had to evacuate, and fast. They moved swiftly, herding shell-shocked Naxians and humans onto any transport they could find. Dropships, cargo haulers, anything with an engine and a hull. Craig led the convoy, his Humvee speeding through the war-torn landscape. Plasma beams lanced down around them, turning the road to molten slag. Vorta forces, sensing the Naxians' weakness, launched ground assaults to harry the refugees. Plasma bolts flew as Craig's Marines fought running battles, defending the convoy's flanks. Each mile was a struggle, each turn a potential ambush. The secret spaceport was their last hope, a hidden complex deep in the mountains. But as they neared it, Craig's heart sank. Dominion forces were already there, swarming over the launch pads, plasma cannons primed. It was going to be a fight just to reach the ships. "Punch through," Craig roared over the comm. "Whatever it takes, get those civilians on board." The convoy smashed into the Vorta lines, transport skidding and swerving as plasma bolts scarred their hulls. Marines leaped out, laying down blistering suppressive fire. Craig was in the thick of it, his rifle bucking, Vorta carapaces shattering under the onslaught. One by one, the transports lifted off, civilian crammed into every space. Craig and a handful of Marines held the line, buying time with blood. A plasma bolt took Hawkins in the chest, burning through his armor. He fell, eyes glazing. Craig snarled and fought on. At last, only one ship remained. Craig and his surviving Marines scrambled aboard, plasma sizzling past their ears. The hatch slammed shut, and the engines roared to life. The ship clawed for the sky, shuddering as the Dominion forces unleashed a final, devastating barrage. The spaceport vanished in a cataclysmic fireball, the shockwave buffeting the fleeing ship. Craig stared out the viewport, watching Thule burn below. The cities, the forests, the brave Naxians who had fought beside him, all consumed by the Dominion's wrath. His fists clenched, knuckles white. Earth awaited, and a battle unlike any he had ever known. But in that moment, as Thule dwindled to an ember in the void, Craig swore a solemn oath. The fight was far from over. In many ways it had only just begun. Craig's shuttle punched through Earth's atmosphere, plasma flaring across the hull. His heart sank as the scope of the devastation came into focus. Dominion warships swarmed in low orbit, disgorging drop pods that streaked towards the surface. Fireballs blossomed across the globe as cities burned under the onslaught. Craig's jaw clenched. He forced the despair down, locking it away. There would be time for grief later. Now he had a job to do. The shuttle touched down at a heavily fortified military base, the perimeter bristling with anti-air batteries and hardened soldiers. Craig and his team were rushed into a command bunker, the walls shaking from distant explosions. Inside, a grim-faced general greeted them. "Captain Mason, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Likewise, sir. What's our situation?" The general gestured to a holographic display of the planet. Red icons denoted Dominion forces, blue representing Earth's defenses. Far too much red, not nearly enough blue. "The Vorta have established beachheads in most major population centers. Our forces are putting up a hell of a fight, but we're losing ground. The Dominion has air and space superiority, and they're using it to devastating effect." Craig studied the map, his mind racing. The Dominion was hitting them hard and fast, aiming to crush resistance before Earth could fully mobilize, but they were overextended, their supply lines stretched thin. An idea formed, reckless and desperate, just the kind of plan he was known for. "Sir, I have a proposal. If we can disrupt the Dominion's logistics, we can buy ourselves some breathing room. I've seen their supply bases, I know how they operate. Give me a strike team and a fast ship, and I'll make them bleed." The general considered, then nodded. "Do it. We'll throw everything we have at the ground war, try to hold the line. But, Captain, understand this. We are fighting for the survival of our species. Failure is not an option." "Understood, sir." As Craig and his team prepped for their mission, the weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. The fate of Earth, of humanity itself, hung in the balance. He thought of Thule, of the brave Naxians who had fought and died by his side. He would not let their sacrifice be in vain. The strike ship Retribution tore free from Earth's gravity well, engines burning hard for Dominion space. Craig stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, Emperor Zorgax's flagship lurked, directing the invasion. One way or another, Craig swore he would end this. For Earth, for Thule, for every world that had suffered under the Dominion's boot. "Approaching target," the pilot reported, jolting Craig from his thoughts. "Dominion supply base dead ahead." "Battle stations," Craig ordered. "Let's introduce ourselves." The Retribution screamed into the supply base's airspace, weapon systems hot. Vorta fighters scrambled to intercept, plasma cannons swiveling to track the human ship. Craig gripped the command console as the first plasma bolts hammered the shields. The Retribution shuddered, but held course, closing on the sprawling Dominion installation. "Weapons free," Craig barked. The Retribution's guns opened up, a storm of missiles and railgun slugs ripping into the Vorta defenses. Fighters exploded, plasma batteries shattered, the supply base's outer perimeter crumbling under the onslaught. But the Dominion forces rallied swiftly, a swarm of automated drones rising to engulf the Retribution. The ship bucked and heaved as the drones latched on, cutting and drilling, trying to breach the hull. The ship descended into chaos, the thunder of boots and the crack of gunfire echoing through the corridors. Craig and his team fought with grim determination, plasma rifles flaring in the gloom, cutting down the Vorta drones in sprays of sparks and shrapnel. But for every drone they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. The Retribution groaned under the assault, hull integrity alarms blaring, the ship shaking itself apart. "Sir," the pilot called, his voice strained, "we can't take much more of this." Craig gritted his teeth. They had to finish this, had to strike a blow against the Dominion, but not at the cost of his crew, his friends. "Helm, lay in a course for the supply base's reactor core. Engineering, overload the drive core. We're going to ram this base and blow it straight to hell." There was a moment of stunned silence, then a chorus of acknowledgements. The crew knew the score. They were ready to make the ultimate sacrifice for Earth, for humanity. The Retribution, trailing fire and debris, hurled itself at the heart of the Dominion base. Vorta ships scattered, desperate to escape the impending cataclysm. Craig watched the reactor grow larger in the view screen, a pulsing red sun that would be their funeral pyre. He thought of his team, of the brave men and women who had followed him to the end. "It's been an honor," he said softly. The Retribution, all guns blazing in final defiance, slammed into the reactor core. For a moment, there was only blinding light and searing heat. Then the world dissolved in a maelstrom of fire and shrapnel as the supply base vanished in a cataclysmic explosion. Silence fell, the void lit by the dying embers of the Dominion outpost. Debris tumbled through the darkness, the shattered remnants of ships and lives. But then, impossibly, a flicker of movement, an escape pod, battered and scarred, tumbling away from the devastation. Inside, Craig slumped against the bulkhead, his face streaked with blood and grime. He had survived, his team had not. As the escape pod limped back towards Earth, Craig felt a cold rage settle in his bones. The Dominion had taken everything from him, his friends, his comrades, his hope. But they had not taken his will to fight, and fight he would to his last breath, for vengeance, for justice, for the future of his world and all worlds. The escape pod breached Earth's atmosphere, trailing fire like a falling star. Craig braced for impact, his mind already racing ahead. The war was far from over, and he would see it through to the bitter end. The pod slammed into the war-torn cityscape, crashing through the ruins of a shattered skyscraper. Craig kicked the hatch open, stumbling out into the smoke and chaos. Around him, the city burned. Plasma fire streaked overhead as human and Vorta forces clashed in the rubble-strewn streets. The air was thick with the stench of death and cordite. Craig grabbed a rifle from a fallen soldier, checking the charge. Time to get back in the fight. He advanced through the ruins, ducking from cover to cover. Vorta warriors scuttled through the debris, their plasma rifles spitting deadly fire. Craig put them down with cold precision, his rifle bucking in his hands. A human scream drew his attention. A squad of soldiers pinned down by a Vorta machine gun nest. Craig flanked the position, lobbing a grenade into the midst of the insectoid warriors. The explosion shredded chitin and sent green ichor splattering across the rubble. "Move up," Craig barked to the soldiers. "We've got to keep pushing." They advanced block by block, building by building. Each street was a battle, each room a potential ambush. Craig fought with a savage intensity, his rage and grief fueling every shot, every thrust of his combat knife. But the Vorta were relentless, their numbers seemingly inexhaustible. For every bug Craig killed, 3 more appeared to take its place. The human line was buckling, threatening to shatter. Craig keyed his comm, desperate for reinforcements, for any scrap of hope. But there was only static, the channels jammed by Dominion interference. He was alone, cut off from his allies, his friends, but still he fought on, a one-man army against the Vorta tide. The battle raged through the day and into the night. The city transformed into a hellscape of fire and rubble. Craig lost track of time, lost track of everything but the next target, the next kill. Craig met them head-on, plasma pistol flaring, knife flashing in the darkness. Chitin cracked, ichor sprayed, inhuman screams filled the air. But it wasn't enough. It could never be enough. The Vorta were too many, their advance inexorable. Craig felt his strength waning, his wounds taking their toll. As the last of his pistol's charge faded away, as his knife snapped on a Vorta's armored carapace, Craig sank to his knees in the rubble. The Vorta closed in, their weapons leveled at his head. The Vorta raised their rifles, mandibles clicking in triumph. Craig tensed, ready for the end. A brilliant lance of energy pierced the night, vaporizing the Vorta where they stood. Craig whirled, hope and disbelief warring in his heart. Striding through the ruins, plasma rifles blazing, was a squad of human soldiers. At their head, a familiar face. "On your feet, Captain," Sergeant Hawkins called out. "This fight isn't over yet." Craig staggered upright, a fierce grin splitting his face. He took a proffered rifle, feeling the weight of it in his hands. "Damn right it isn't," he growled. "Let's finish this." Together they plunged back into the fray, the reunited remnants of Craig's team. They fought with renewed purpose, renewed fury, the tide of battle shifting with each block they took, each Vorta squad they shattered. Overhead, the sky lit up with the flashes of orbital combat as Earth's fleet clashed with the Dominion armada. The ground shook with the thunder of distant explosions, the very air seeming to tremble. But Craig and his warriors pressed on, unyielding, unbreakable. They would fight to the last man, the last bullet, the last breath in their bodies. For Earth, for humanity, for victory. They would not falter, they would not fail. They were humanity's last hope, and they would fight to the bitter end. As the battle for Earth raged on, Craig's comm crackled to life with an urgent message. Emperor Zorgax had launched a devastating attack on the Naxian refugee fleet, seeking to crush the last remnants of resistance and break humanity's spirit. Craig's heart wrenched with a painful choice, his duty to Earth or his loyalty to the Naxians who had fought and bled beside him. With a heavy heart, he made his decision. He had to help the Naxians. Slipping away from the front lines, Craig infiltrated the human base's hangar. There, gleaming under the harsh lights, was a prototype fighter craft, sleek, deadly, untested. Craig didn't hesitate. He vaulted into the cockpit, firing up the engines. The craft roared to life, lifting off in a blaze of thrusters. Craig punched the coordinates for the Naxian fleet, praying he wasn't too late. The stars blurred as he pushed the engines to their limit. the inertial dampeners straining to keep up. He dropped out of warp speed into a nightmare. The Naxian fleet was in ruins, ships shattered and drifting, bodies floating in the void. Plasma fires flickered in the darkness. Craig's heart sank, but then his sensors picked up a faint distress signal. Weaving through the debris, he found a cluster of life signs aboard a crippled transport. He docked, leaping from his craft with a medical kit in hand. Inside, the scene was one of devastation. Naxians lay strewn about, many dead, others gravely wounded. Craig moved among them, administering what aid he could. Then, a weak voice called his name. "Craig?" It was Xanth, slumped against a bulkhead, his tentacles shredded, purple blood pooling beneath him. Craig knelt beside his friend, grasping his trembling tentacle. "Hold on, Xanth, I'm here, I'm going to get you out of here." But Xanth shook his bulbous head. "No, my friend, my time is done, but there is still hope." His voice was fading, each word an effort. "The Resistance, we developed a weapon, a device that can disrupt the Dominion's technology, render their ships and weapons useless." Craig's heart raced, a chance to turn the tide, to save Earth and avenge the fallen. Where is it? Hidden. Safe. Xanth pressed a data chip into Craig's hand, his tentacles slick with blood. But to use it, you must take it to the heart of their fleet, to the Emperor's flagship itself. Craig nodded, his jaw set. "I'll do it, I'll end this once and for all." Xanth's eyes, once so bright, were dimming. "You've been a true friend, Craig, a brother. Save your world, save them all." His voice trailed off, his tentacle going slack in Craig's grip. Craig bowed his head, grief and rage warring in his heart. Then he stood, the data chip clenched tight in his fist. He had a mission now, a purpose. He returned to his fighter, setting course for the Dominion fleet. He opened a comm channel to his allies on Earth, to the brave men and women he had fought beside for so long. "This is Captain Craig Mason," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions raging within him. "I have a plan to stop the Dominion, but it's a one-way trip. It's been an honor serving with you all. Keep fighting. Keep Earth safe. Mason out." He cut the comm before they could respond, before they could try to talk him out of it. He knew what he had to do. As his fighter sliced through the stars towards the looming Dominion fleet, Craig steeled himself for the battle to come. For Earth, for the Naxians, for all the lives lost and all those yet to be saved, he would fight. And if necessary, he would die. The Dominion ships loomed ahead, a bristling wall of metal and menace. Craig gunned the engines, diving headlong into the fray. Plasma bolts sizzled past his cockpit as Vorta fighters scrambled to intercept him. Craig jinked and wove, his fingers dancing over the controls. The prototype fighter responded like a dream, outpacing the Vorta ships with ease. He lined up a shot, squeezing the trigger. A Vorta fighter exploded in a ball of flame. But there were too many, an endless swarm pouring from the massive carriers. Plasma pounded Craig's shields, alarms blaring in the cockpit. He gritted his teeth, pouring power into the thrusters. The Emperor's flagship loomed ahead, a monstrous construct bristling with weapons. Craig angled toward it, weaving through the hail of defensive fire. His shields were failing, hull integrity critical. But he was close, so close. Suddenly the viewscreen flickered to life. The visage that appeared sent a chill down Craig's spine. It was Emperor Zorgax himself, his alien features twisted into a cruel sneer. "Foolish human," the Emperor hissed. "You struggle in vain. Even now my forces are beginning the process of terraforming your pitiful Earth. Soon it will be a Dominion world, and your kind will be nothing more than a memory." Rage boiled in Craig's veins, white-hot and all-consuming. His homeworld, his people, everything he had fought for, all being swept away by this monstrous being's ambition. His finger hovered over the trigger for the disruption device. One press and it would all be over. The Dominion fleet would be crippled, Earth would be saved. But at what cost? Craig's gaze fell on the scars crisscrossing his fighter's hull, each one a reminder of a battle fought, a friend lost. He thought of Bulldog, of Reese, of all the brave souls who had given their lives in this war. He thought of Xanth, who had died to give him this chance. There was no choice, not really. He had known that the moment he had volunteered for this mission. Some prices were worth paying, some sacrifices had to be made. "This is for Earth," Craig whispered. "For the Naxians, for everyone you've hurt. Burn in hell, you son of a bitch." You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.